the DB show. I am Dan Kornhauser. I'm here with my co-host Bobby Hunt. Ignore the thing scrolling at the bottom. I'm having connectivity issues over here and figuring stuff out on my end. We're good. We're no longer an amateur show, I promise. Well, with that in mind, let's start. We're doing our top 10s, the first one of the season. We're doing NFL this whole show. I'm excited. Let's jump right into it. I did a thing. I created a little chart here for us, Bob. So once we start getting into it and you start listing names, I'll put the chart together, make it pretty, and then, bring it up on the screen so we have something to look at. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do this.
All right. So we're going to give our first three, which we're going to start at the back of the top 10. So 10, 9, and 8. Bob, give me your three.
All right. Number 10, I'm going to go with Aaron Jones, running back from the Packers. Excuse me. He had a good year last year. Do you want us to explain each one, or you just want me to name them? And then
just list them. I'll list mine, and then we'll jump into it back and forth.
Okay. So, yeah. Aaron Jones, number 10, Packers. Number 9, Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. Number 8, Dalvin Cook, who is currently a free agent, might sign with the Dolphins, could be the Jets. Maybe he goes back to Minnesota. A couple of the options out there, but still unsigned as of right now.
Okay, so Aaron Jones, Packers, Tony Pollard, Cowboys, and Dalvin Cook, NA at the moment. We'll see where he goes. So I'm glad you put Dalvin Cook there because, to be honest, I had a little thing between Cook and a couple of other running backs, but I did end up putting Cook in my top 10 as well. So I have Cook actually at 10th. Then I have at number 9, Aaron Jones. And sorry, my computer's butt. Here we go. And number 8, actually, I went a route. I didn't want to go this route, and I think he could very well finish higher than this season, but there's a lot of questions. And I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs here at number 8. And with that in mind, I figure I'll just start off with that. I mean, are you shocked, Bob, that I have Jacobs at number 8? Don't give me where he is in your top 10. I assume he's in there. Don't tell me where he's at on yours, but are you surprised that I have him at this point?
I'm not shocked, but I know you were knocking him in the first place and joking about him getting the franchise tag months ago. Even though you knew it would happen, you thought it was ugly, that he's not that great. I really liked him coming out, and I think you did too, and we both pegged him to that spot that the Raiders took him back when they had Mike Mayock and John Gruden. But I am a little surprised that he's that low. I didn't expect him to be in your top 3 or 4, definitely not. But seeing him at 8 is pretty surprising. Do tell a little more why.
Well, listen, I know he's coming off a season where he just led the NFL in yards from scrimmage. I know he led the league in rushing. I get all that. 12 rushing touchdowns, 1,600-plus yards, 4.9 yards per carry, 53 receptions, 400 yards receiving. All wonderful things. Yes, 100%, yes. But I don't know. There's questions about him coming out of training camp. Is he going to sit out? Is he going to miss any regular season time? He has no interest in signing the franchise tag, so he won't be playing until that point, unless they give him a deal like Saquon got a 1-year deal from the Giants today, which we'll get into a little bit later. But there's questions about that. And if he doesn't start the season from week 1, in fact, if he doesn't join the team in a few weeks, he's going to need a few weeks to get his conditioning up to game level. He's going to probably need at least 2 or 3 weeks of practice time to get fit for the regular season. That's what the preseason is about. That's what training camp is about. You get that going early, you participate, you work off the rust from the summer and whatever, you get back into it. Come week 1, ideally, you're ready. Now, that doesn't always happen, and the first month of the season is always sloppy with penalties and bad football because a lot of guys are sitting preseason and a lot of vets do sit out training camp practices. But all that aside, with running backs, it's different. Like if he shows up week 1, he's not starting week 1 unless he had been practicing for a couple weeks prior. If you're a quarterback, maybe you could slide right in, no problem, week 1. You missed the whole preseason. You didn't practice in training camp. Maybe as a quarterback who's established, you step in week 1 and you don't really skip a beat. But a running back who You're expecting to get minimum 20 touches a game. Are
I'd
you
say
really?
the opposite. I think with a running back, you can just plug them right in. Now, the main question really I was going to ask you, though, is do you really expect Jacobs to be holding out that long? Because personally, as much as he's talking tough, may have left Las Vegas. We'll get to Barkley, but
That's what I'm saying.
right now his deal
It's
is done.
ugly.
He did sign the franchise tag plus more. We'll get into that a little later.
Yeah.
But I really don't see Jacobs missing playing time in the regular season, nor do I really see him extending this that much further. I think he'll get that franchise tag signed. It may not be in the next few weeks, but I think before the season it will happen. When do you see it happening? If at all?
Honestly, man, it's ugly. I don't think he misses much regular season time, if any. But in situations like this, you have to consider in the back of your mind, the running back market's already depressed. The rates for running backs are dropping, and there's a couple of all-pro running backs out there right now in free agency who aren't getting a lot of love, it seems, from a lot of teams for one reason or another. And that's not a surprise, the way things have been going.
We talked about this last week, though, too.
We did. I don't want to repeat last week, but I think it's going to get ugly because then you got to wonder, is he going to, like, aside from holding out, when he comes back, is he really going to be giving it his all? Is he really going to want to put his body on the line in that pass block when that D end is coming free off the edge? Is he really going to go 100% knowing that A, he doesn't want to be there, B, he's not getting paid what he wants to get paid, and C, he's a free agent after the season with no guarantees. If he gets hurt, he's effed. He's totally screwed. So that becomes a question as well. And if that comes into play, then you're talking about, if he gets nicked up, is he going to sit out a few games with injuries and stuff like that? It could get really silly depending on how petty he wants to get. But that's factored into these rankings.
I get some of the concern there, and you want to see him repeat it. But he did have 8 touchdowns rushing the year prior. Not a great year. He didn't hit 1,000. But he's had some subpar years before that. But some of the other guys we'll get to in this list have as well.
So
that, though, I just want to ask now, who did you leave off? Was Tony Pollard the guy that didn't make it into the top 10?
No, Tony Pollard's definitely top 10. The guys that I left off, my honorable mentions are Bijan Robinson, Ramondre Stevenson, Travis Etienne. Those are the next 3 up for me. And it's mostly because, A, I love Stevenson. I love the fact that it's just him in New England. I know the New England typically likes rotating their backs. That's why they're a no man's land for fantasy football. But Bill Belichick has shown a willingness in the past to give one running back a rock. He did it with Corey Dillon. He did it with LeGarrette Blount, Antoine Smith back in the day. Like, he's had his backs. Like, yeah, they've always had rotating guys, but he's had running backs that he's leaned on. And Stevenson was their passing back last year. He's going to be that this year. And it's just him and a couple of, mid-round rookie running backs, second-year running backs, guys who don't really inspire you. Like, I like Strong coming out of college, but what do you expect? And then Robinson, because, 8th overall pick, he should get that workload that you expect. And, I mean, we've seen offensive have 2,000-yard rushers. I don't know if Algier is going to do 1,000 yards again with Robinson there, but Robinson should produce. And I love Etienne going into this year as well. So those guys were tough to leave out.
Those are on my honorable mentions as well. I especially like Bijan Robinson. He'll be on this list, I feel like, comfortably next year. He should get that workload in Atlanta. They didn't draft him at number 8 just to not have him play a lot. And it is worth noting that he's getting the most cash of any running back this year. His cap hit isn't the highest, but he is getting the most salary this year, getting the most dollars in his bank account of any running back this season, which is crazy to think. He's a rookie, but he was picked in the top 10. And as we've been talking about for a few weeks now, the RB market is depressed.
He's going to be a top 10 running back at the end of the season. I just didn't have the sand to put him there at the beginning of the season.
And nor should we. I think this should be more about how it is right now. Leave rookies out of it. Leave guys with major injury problems from the last year or two out of it. But I did want to ask you about one of those guys that kind of fits that mold is Alvin Kamara. Did he make this top 10 list?
He did not. And he was another one. He's top 15 running back for me at this point. But he's definitely fallen off. I mean, there's too many questions there too. aside from health concerns, it's the legal concerns. Is he going to actually be suspended for what went down this past offseason or in his past, whenever it was? So he's got legal questions hanging over him. He's getting older. The injuries are questions. Like, that stuff adds up. And I don't know if the Saints are going to be that good per se. And his play kind of fell off this past year already. The decline has begun.
I knew the stats were down anyway. Yards per carry way down, the receptions way down. Obviously, part of that is due to the fact that the Saints don't have Drew Brees there anymore. But he's not only not producing as much, but he hasn't been playing as many games. And one interesting note, when I did check out his stats from this year, it's his birthday today, so he just turned 28. But like you mentioned, he's already started to really fall off for a number of reasons that I just stated. I had to leave Kamara off as well. He didn't make my top 10.
All right, so enough with the guys who didn't make it. Let's go back to the guys who did make it. So we've got 10, 9, 8 out of the way. For me, it's Cook, Jones, Jacobs. For Bob, it's Jones, Pollard, and Cook. Now we're at 7, 6, 5. And you know what? Let's do 4 too, so we just have a top 3 at the end. And Bob, since you started us off with the back end, I'll start us off with the middle. So at number 7, I have Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. At number 6, I have Saquon Barkley for the Giants. And at 5, I have Austin Eckler. And at 4, I have Tony Pollard. Bob?
Okay. All right, so my next guys, at number 7, I also had Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. Number 6, this is where I had Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 5, Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. Number 4, I have Austin Eckler of the Chargers. Now, I think clearly the big difference here is where we have Tony Pollard ranked. I have him 9th. You have him 4th. Dan, why do you have Tony Pollard 4th?
He's a stud. I mean, he's a stud in every possible way.
There's a Shingood stud, all right? Is he that type of stud?
He's an actual stud. Unlike Sengun, okay? He's an actual studly do-right, all right? So this past season, in a split time with Zeke, he still had 1,000 yards rushing, 9 rushing touchdowns, 39 receptions, 371 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. I mean, as long as he's healthy, if he's going to play 16, 17 games, why not expect 1,800 total yards? 12, 1,300 on the ground, 400 or 500 through the air. I think that should be the minimum. 15 total touchdowns, at least double digits minimum. Again, because he had 12 this past year. Why not replicate that? They want to run the ball. That's why they moved on from Kellen Moore at offensive coordinator, because they thought he was too pass happy in key spots. So they want to run the ball more. They have the O-line to do it as long as Zach Martin doesn't hold out. I love it. I think it's a recipe for success.
I think you are onto something. I've liked Tony Pollard for the last few years. I think you also like him in fantasy, given you put him 4th. He's a little rich for my blood. I still think another player that needs to do more proving it. But yes, in the timeshare, he looked good. He's been kind of an underrated darling of fantasy community for the last few years, seeing how Zeke was just continuing to go down in production. Tony Pollard has that burst. He has that speed factor. And he had a good year last year. He had 5+ yards per carry, and he's going to get the ball more. So I think he can climb in these rankings. But the one thing that I worry about with him is the injury he is coming off. Now, we're assuming he'll be fully ready, but he broke his leg and had a high ankle sprain coming off that loss to the 49ers in the playoffs.
Right.
That's one big area of concern for me moving forward. But there won't be as much competition with Zeke poaching as many carries. I still just don't see him being able to get enough TDs on the ground unless he's breaking off big ones. I still don't see him being able to punch the rock in from the 1-yard line like Zeke was doing for years. I forget who their backups are. I know they drafted somebody. They probably signed another player. I'm sure you'll fill us in. But I can't put him that high. I think that's just a little much for my blood personally. But the dual threat factor is there, and the increased workload, I understand where you're pretty bullish on him and could see him rise up my rankings next year from 9.
I'm very bullish on him. And his backups are Malik Davis, a free agent they signed out of college a couple of years ago, and Deuce Vaughn, the very small running back who they drafted out of Kansas State in the sixth
Right.
round this year.
That's a good thing. He's not going to be stealing goal line carries at 5'6" or so, whatever.
And that's the other thing. The fact that there's zero competition behind him. When it comes to stuff like this, you need to have three things. You need to have talent, which obviously Tony Pollard does. You need to have the opportunity, which, I mean, he should, given the offense and given his spot and the fact that there's no competition behind him. And then the third thing you need is some luck. So as long as he can stay healthy, the thing, like, you know, that's the big thing, like you mentioned, coming off those injuries. As long as he can stay healthy, he's going to be a stud. Which brings us to our top three. Now, honestly, this is going a lot faster than I thought it would. We're only.
Something I did also want to touch on before we get into that top three, because we do have time. I was actually going to, that was part of what I was preparing to say. But since we have a little bit of time, thinking about that 1 yard line type deal, and regardless of the rankings, real quick, wouldn't the Cowboys maybe be a team that Leonard Fournette pairs with nicely to fill maybe that role, to not put so much of the burden on Tony Pollard when you have Malik Davis and Deuce Vaughn as the backups? Or do you see him maybe going somewhere else?
You know, Fournette is a good one because he's taken a few trips this offseason to different teams and had different workouts. He had one recently. I feel like he might have had it with the Cowboys recently, if I remember correctly. Something like that sticks out. I was reading something about Lenny Fournette earlier that sticks out for some reason. But regardless,
I think the Patriots might have been one as well.
Patriots, that was the one, not the Cowboys. The Patriots was the recent one that he just did. But no, I'm not worried about Lenny Fournette at all, especially with Pollard or any of these top running backs. Honestly, if anything, I think Lenny should go to Vegas just in case something does happen with Jacobs out there. Man, it'll be the RB1 from the get.
Well, and looking past even Fournette, unless if you have anything else on him, but besides him, who had Melvin Gordon getting signed before him, or Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, another one that's out there. Melvin Gordon got cut by the Broncos last year, was with the Chiefs on their practice squad, didn't play for them, but still got a Super Bowl ring out of it. He went to the Ravens. But why haven't Kareem Hunt, Zeke Elliott, Lenny Fournette gotten jobs? It's weird. Well, I'm not surprised by Zeke, actually, since I think he is truly washed. But I guess teams are just waiting for injuries to happen in the preseason.
I mean, they always do. It's just a matter of who's it going to happen to. There's going to be a running back who tears his ACL or something crazy. Matter of fact, didn't something like that just happen, actually? Naheem Hines got hit. He was on a jet ski, and he got hit. He was stationary, just chilling, and he got somebody else driving their jet ski, and I think he tore his ACL or something crazy like that.
Details on that, but yes, I would find it hard for you to tear it unless someone hit into it on a jet ski. So it does actually kind of make sense. It's not like, oh, I was skiing and someone just hit me. No, like you probably planned it the wrong way or did something wrong. But jet ski, yeah, you're right. If he's stationary, how can you do it? Unless he was doing crazy backflips. That's the thing. Who knows if we'll ever find out. But yes, Naheem Hines out for the year.
Yes. So things like that will happen. Kadarius Toney.
Go for Fournette. All we're talking about Fournette, the Bills don't have a running back. What? You're going to rely on, obviously Hines is out. Zach Moss is gone. Devin Singletary's mid at best. I think Fournette makes a lot of sense in that offense, and he's a big back. You can use him in the postseason. Playoff Lenny.
You know, I like where your head's at, but if I'm them, bring in the other Cook's brother.
You're giving Cook the rock? That's what you're doing?
Well,
you're signing Dalvin. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Listen, number one, I would be fine going with James Cook because James Cook, when he gets the rock, he goes in. He would be their passing back. He would have split it with Hines, but now that Hines is gone, he should be their full-time passing back. He's a good receiver out of the backfield, and I think he could really make some noise in this spread-out offense. All he has to do is be average. He doesn't have to average 5.5 yards a carry or anything crazy. He doesn't need to have 100 catches or whatever. Just be that third or fourth option, a dump off guy, get and be shifty enough to make some plays. I think he would fit perfectly. But bring in Dalvin Cook. Why not? I'd rather that than Lenny Fournette.
I think that's fair. Dalvin Cook has more left in the tank, and we both had him on our top 10 list. So clearly someone should sign him that needs a running back. But when that it will be, who knows? We have some teams that are interested, but still no one willing to give him the dollars per year that he's expecting and probably deserves.
Probably. But anyway, let's move on. Let's go to the top three. There's three backs left that I think we're both going to have. I don't think there should be anybody else up here. The question is, what order are they going to be in, and who's going to discuss who? So, Bob, take it away.
I'm pretty confident that we will have a different top three. We did 10 through 8, had different ones. Did 7 through 4, another few differences. 1 through 3, fully expect it once more. At number 3, Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. Number 2, I have Christian McCaffrey of San Francisco 49ers. And number 1, he is King Henry. Until someone takes his crown, he should still be number 1. And that's Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you did that just to get a reaction from me, because you're going to get a reaction. But I have Henry 3, Chubb 2, McCaffrey 1. So you got Chubb, McCaff, Henry. I got Henry, Chubb, McCaff. And let me put this chart back up. So now we have something to look at now that it's all done with. I put it up there for a moment. Giggity. And there it is. Look how pretty that is.
It looks beautiful, man. Just amazing. Too bad Dalvin Cook with that NA ruins it, but that's not your fault. That's every team out there. Not every team, but at least teams that could really use a running back. I should say Buffalo, potentially. But it could show once another injury inevitably happens.
So let's talk about Henry. We got some time to kill.
Well, I have him number 1, and I think he deserves to be up there because he's going on, 5+ years straight of 1,000+. He gets double-digit TDs 5 years in a row. He had another 1,500-yard season last year. He's 3 years away since he had that 2K rushing title year. He still averaged 4.4 yards per carry last year. He's just been the best back of the last 5 years, bar none. I'm basing this not only on what he's been doing lately, but what I still expect him to honestly do. Right now, to me, he is the best back in the league. The only other guy that I considered for this spot, and I did hem and haw with it, was who you picked number 1, which is Christian McCaffrey. Because when he's healthy, he's just unbelievably dynamic. He can catch 100 balls easily. He used to with the Panthers. In some of those Panthers years, he had snap counts of 90% or higher. He's a true workhorse. Problem is, like you said, and preface some of this with, is when healthy. He only played 7 games in 2021. He finally had a healthy year last year between the Panthers and the 49ers. Look at Dan, putting Bob is confused at the bottom. So to the audience out there, Dan runs these things under there. He's in control. So that is wrong. I'm sure I should have some support coming my way at some point. But Bow Wow, it's Derek at number 1. It's for me. It's got to be.
So okay. Here we go. So before I go on my rant of Derrick Henry, I do want to preface it by saying Bob's right on everything he just said. It's undeniable. He's been going in the last few years. King Henry, girth legend, does what he wants to do out there. Yes, 2000, all that good stuff. For me, it's more a matter of the only reason I have him at 3 is because of his real life value, which is what these rankings are. If this were fantasy, he wouldn't even be my top 5. But in real life, he is that offense. Everything about that offense runs through him. He did go in last year, 1,500 yards rushing, etc. But he's going to be 29 years old. He's led the league in carries 3 of the last 4 years. The 1 year he didn't, it's because he missed half the year. He only played in 8 games. This past season, yes, statistically he produced as expected. A little below maybe what it was expected, but he produced regardless. Second in the league in rushing. But half of those games, he was awful, absolutely awful. Matter of fact, I didn't have this, but I'm gonna pull it up right now. I'm gonna bring up the game logs because there was a span of like the first like 12 games of the season or something like that, where it was Henry game below average, Henry game below average, Henry game below average. And it wasn't even a thing like, oh, he was playing good defenses or anything crazy. He was getting his touches. It wasn't a matter of, oh, he only got 8 carries in this game or something ridiculous. Man was getting his touches every game. It's just really bad games. And I think that's the beginning of the end for him. So here we go. Week 2, 13 for 25 against the Bills in a blowout. Then he had a bunch of good weeks in a row. Okay, cool.
Bunch of good weeks.
I say that because
also,
he had 100 yards. He had 100 in a row, but one of those was 3.64 yards per carry. The other one was 4.2. Like, he's getting 30 carries a game. He's getting 100 yards, but elite running backs do 4.5 plus. Bob, I know that's the average per carry is a big thing with you. I know when it comes to the best.
And I do love Nick Chubb for that reason, and he gets 5 yards per carry all the time, but he's also not on the field nearly as much as these guys. Now, to some, that could be an argument for Chubb. You could argue, oh, well, if he gets more of the time, which he could this year, now that Kareem Hunt's probably out of the picture.
And that's why I have him ahead of Henry, because he's efficient with his touches. And yes, Henry just averaged 4.4, but he did that because of.
But he's efficient because he doesn't do as much for his team, because they didn't feel comfortable enough with him in a third down back role and being someone who can catch passes out of the backfield. That's why I can't. And I know you could also argue against Henry in that case, but he still does more in that regard, and he has a much higher snap count percentage. Chubbs has been in the 50% range for years now.
See, and with Chubb, the thing is now Hunt isn't there either. So now it's all Chubb. Just like there's nobody in Dallas behind Pollard, there's nobody behind Chubb. So he should get the Lions' share of the touches, 90% of those backfield touches if he's healthy, and get more work in the passing game. But then look, hold on. Against the Broncos.
That remains to be seen. He should, theoretically, given the changes at that position behind him, and another year with Deshaun Watson. But until I see that, that's why I still got to put Chubb at 3.
And then, but going back to Henry, I mean, then you look at against Denver, 53 yards, 2.7 yards per carry. Next game, Green Bay.
For the other running backs too. I'm sure we can go to Chubb's game log.
Yeah, but hold on. Yeah, but when we're talking about the number 1 back in the league as you have him, you're not expecting 53 yards, 87 yards, 38, 30, with 2.7, 3.1,
okay.
2.2, 2.7 yard per carry averages.
Whose team did better? The Titans were better than the Browns.
And
the worst quarterback. Now, I know they didn't have Watson until late, but it's not like
Watson missed, 11 games or something crazy?
I just can't put Chubb ahead of Henry. Like, you putting McCaffrey ahead of him, I'm actually okay with, because even I wrestled between the two, and one thing that knocked McCaffrey down was the availability, the fact that he hasn't been there as much as Derrick Henry's been there. 5 straight seasons of 1K plus. Whereas McCaffrey has a litany of injury history, especially to his legs that we can go through. Luckily, he played most of the games last year, but I just can't in good conscience put Chubb ahead of Derrick Henry yet. Is he a great pure runner? 100%. We both have him in the top 3. We were splitting hairs when it really comes down to it, at least in this regard, because it's the difference between 1 and 3. It's not like – I think Pollard's a really big one that people can point out. He has him 4. I have him 9. But between 3 and 1, I don't think there's a huge drop-off to Chubb. And, yeah, Chubb's younger. Maybe Derrick Henry's fall off, as you're projecting, is coming, but I think Henry's just an all-time great, and he's so good that he can still do it, and he's 29. It's not like he's already 30 or 32. He's not that washed yet. He's still productive.
And you know what? That's the thing that scares me about Henry is like Jacobs, for example, has been healthy. He plays all the games, you know what I'm saying, every year or whatever. Henry has too, for the most part, except for a couple of years ago where he only played in 8 games. And then you look at a guy like Chubb, and then you look at a guy like McCaffrey. Those guys missed games seemingly the last couple of years, and it's almost a guarantee. Now, this past year, Chubb played 17 games, had over 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns. I fully expect that number to stay the same if he plays 15-plus games. And even still, say what you want, Chubb was 4 yards away off his rookie season from getting 1,000 yards, which would be starting his career 5 years, 5 straight years of 1,000 yards rushing. And in terms of touchdowns, he's got 8, 8, 12, 8, 12. You want consistency? The man's got 48 touchdowns in 5 years, and he's missed, I don't know, 10, 12, 15, something like that, games that over those years that he could have played. It could have been higher. Like, the missing time is something you got to factor in, but I think this is another one. He's going into his year 28, 6th year, a dominant offensive line, good quarterback. On the flip side, other things keep going against Henry. It's the workload that he has. Leading the league in carries 3 out of the 4 years. Looking at a list of legends, Bob, I'm talking about Hall of Famers: Dickerson, Tomlinson, Peterson, Brown, Sanders. None of them were leading the league in rushing 3 out of 4 years. Like, I think Dickerson led the league in rushing, I think 3 or 4 years in his career, but they were like 3 years apart from one another. Henry's doing it 3 out of the last 4. Now, I know they're not running. There's not bell cow running backs today as there was in the past. Guys aren't getting 400 carries a season like Larry Johnson did when he was going in and stuff like that. But still, it's worth noting that even Hall of Fame legends aren't leading the league in carries every year. This is going to catch up to him. And that team sucks. I mean, it's great that they got DeAndre Hopkins, but their offensive line maybe was the worst in football last season, and they did absolutely nothing to address it this offseason. It may be the worst offensive line in football again. And as much as I love Vrabel, as much as I love Hopkins, he's going to be facing 9-man boxes every down, as he should, because Tannehill ain't airing it out. And there's whispers that part of the reason DeAndre Hopkins waited as long as he did in free agency, despite numerous teams needing a potential wide receiver one like him, was because teams think they think he's washed. That's why Arizona released him. Nobody wanted to trade with him because, well, not only the high cap hit, but there's rumors that he's washed. I don't think he's washed. I think he still has something to offer, and he should be a bargain at $12 million a year in Tennessee. But there's a lot of factors going against Henry, man.
It catches up to everyone. Let's be honest. You're right. Father Time is undefeated. At some point, he will fall off. I just have my doubts that it'll be this year in his age 29 season.
You know, let me ask you a question. If he runs for 1,300 yards and scores 10 touchdowns, would you consider that? Oh, but he averages 3.9 yards a carry, like he's what's his face in Pittsburgh? Najee Harris, like he's Najee Harris out here, averaging 3.8 yards a carry and shit. Would you consider that a success and think that Henry is still on top of his game?
No, that yards per carry would be the main difference. He'd be going down from 5 or 4.4 last year, and obviously he was way higher in the very midst of his prime. I just still think he's at the top of his game. You even mentioned he's led the league in rushing 3 of the last 4 years, so that kind of
helps. Rushing attempts.
Rushing attempts. Okay. Well, he had the rushing title in 2020. I think he might have even had it the year prior. And this past year, he could have won it had he played that extra game. It still would have been close. Jacobs had about 110 yards or something.
Yeah.
Around
100, yeah. 120, 115, something like that. Yeah.
I just don't think that fall off is happening yet. And part of that goes back to me saying he's a legend. He's one of the greatest running backs we've seen, probably the greatest of this recent generation, the last 5, 6, 7 years. And he's also a physical specimen. We're talking about a unique running back, one like we've probably never seen before. Guy who's 6'3", 240 or 250, chiseled, that can run a 4.4 40. We're talking about a special running back. He's almost like Jim Brown in terms of just being head and shoulders above his peers in terms of just sheer physical ability. So I think that helps him. That's why they give him such a volume. At some point, yeah, it's going to wear him down. I just don't want to – I'm not ready yet to knock him off that pedestal as the number one running back in the league. I'm not.
And that's fine. I think the fall off is here. I think it's the beginning of the fall off. I think this past season showed that as girthy as Derrick Henry is, he can't be expected to just will them to victory on his thickness.
I do want to note that over the last 2 years, total TDs wise, he did have more than McCaffrey and Chubb. Just want to roll that out there.
Just want to
23. Chubb had 22. McCaffrey had 15. Although McCaffrey's would have been way higher had he not missed 10 games 2 years ago. But
now, yeah, is this rushing touchdowns or total touchdowns?
Total TDs. I looked at total TDs, and I don't know where you're planning to go next, but I certainly have an idea as far as that goes. Cheers.
So aside from Bow Wow, because I did have to get a lot of stuff out there and give you my reasoning on air as to why I have him where he is, because we've talked about this before off the air in our group chat with Greg, and you guys have laughed at me, but I've never been able to actually explain it. So I just wanted to throw those out there now you know, Greg can suck it. But let's go to Chubb and let's go to McCaffrey. Now, you know, I love me some Chubb.
You love little Dwayne's.
I love Chubb. That's my boy. I'm a huge fan. And he just finished the year, 1,500 yards, like I said, rushing, 12 touchdowns. Slated to have a big role moving forward, not only on the ground, but he should be their main back on all downs. Another one, 90% of the downs should belong to Chubb unless he gets hurt. Or they're blowing somebody out. But was the difference between Chubb and McCaffrey, Bob, literally the passing game? Is that what set them apart for you?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Big difference in how much their snap count is when they're healthy. And I just feel like McCaffrey, because of his dynamic ability in the passing game, it elevates him over a lot of his peers. One could put him down maybe even further, just saying, look, he's just not been healthy enough 2020 and 2021 or injury-marred seasons. Okay, great, he did it last year, but is he going to prove it once more? But I think he can. And he always has a high yards per carry. He's on the field a lot. Teams depend on him. I said before, he had a couple years where he had 90% snap counts, and as well, he had 100-plus receptions in those years. I think, 2018 and 2019 with the Panthers? And I don't expect the 49ers to wear him out as much and give him that much because they're not going to want him getting injured like he had in those other seasons. But even running the ball, he's effective. He's a good running back. He has the vision. He can see the field well. He still had over 1,000 yards rushing last year. He is a special back and can just do it all for a team. And it's funny because that's where I get where he's number one for you. With Derrick, it is different because he's really not involved in the passing game a lot. He is a little bit more than Chubb, but him, it's just that their entire identity revolves around him. Now, it'll be interesting to see if the 49ers wind up doing that offensively with McCaffrey. Probably not, given that they have Deebo Samuel in the fold and George Kittle. But he is an absolute beast. He's a weapon. You can use him in rushing and receiving. So I get why you'd put him number one. He's a special back. And I just really hope we can get a full season out of him. If not 17 games, let's see him for 15 or 16 because he could easily go over 2,000 scrimmage yards and get 20 TDs if he's around for the majority of the year.
Well, listen, just to dispel that rumor, the man played 17 games and he started 16 games this past season. So, yes, he had injury issues in 2020 and 2021. He played a total combined 10 games. But yes, when he plays 16 plus, he's arguably the best running back in the NFL.
Yeah, I felt like he missed a game. I guess it was the one where he probably started in didn't start in one of the games. No, it was the first game with the Niners. Probably it was probably he didn't start, but he came in as a backup just for that first one after he got traded.
But yeah, so he didn't miss any time this year. But the team change mid-season might have thrown him off a little bit. However, he did pick it up as the season wore on later on in the year. He did finish with over 1,100 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and he still had 85 receptions for 741 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. The dual threat is unquestioned. And in 2019, that was his second year of 100-plus receptions, but the first time he crossed the 1,000-yard threshold. I think if he plays 16, 17 games this year, I think that's firmly within the realm of possibility. A full season in the San Francisco 49ers rushing offense. The offensive line has some questions, specifically in the interior and at right tackle, if their replacement at right tackle can fill in for McGlinchey, who left in free agency. But that team knows how to run. When it comes to running the ball, you don't bat an eye at a Shanahan run offense.
100%. Great.
And
that's where I was going to go. Is Kyle Shanahan led offenses? The running backs produce. They're able to rush and receive and just be utilized in the way that they should be. I expect more big things out of McCaffrey in a full season with San Francisco.
And then, just looking at his games with San Fran. So, yeah, the one game that he didn't start was his first game with San Francisco in week 7. But after that, the man had a couple of bad games on the ground, but he was the weapon he was expected to be. 94 yards in his first start against the Rams with 8 receptions, two touchdowns, total touchdowns. The list goes on and on. 119 against Tampa on the ground, 108 against Seattle, 121 against the Raiders. The passing, every week the passing was right. 4 receptions, 7, 4, 8, 6, 6.
And hey, everyone should certainly fire him up in fantasy and draft him as early as you can, because that division kind of sucks now. The Rams, Cardinals, Seahawks, defenses, he's going to torch those teams. Now, the Seahawks don't suck overall as a team, but that defense could definitely be had. Getting 6 games against those teams, he'll get fat on those.
Yep. So I think we're done with the running backs. We went ham at the end here. But I do want to throw a couple of things out there that we didn't talk about yet. One of those happened right before we went on the air, and it was Justin Herbert, quarterback for the Chargers, signing a 5-year, $262.5 million extension. He'll be a Charger through the 2029 season, and he is now the highest paid player in the league at $52.5 million per season. Now, the next question is Burrow. How much is he getting? And is it going to be just a blank check and say, hey, what do you want?
It might as well be, but no, it'll just be incrementally higher. My guess would be in that 53 to 55 million per year range, because you just said Herbert was 52.5. He's certainly going to get higher than that. Hurts had gotten 255. Herbert gets a total of 262.5. I'm looking at, for Burrow, I would think 270. At the minimum, 265. It's going to be higher. So 270, 275 is what I would project coming up next.
And if I'm reading this correctly, in year 1, Herbert gets $100 million.
Woo! Probably signing bonus and then whatever salary he's getting is my guess.
$218.7 million in guarantees.
Right. And that's over the course of the contract. But yes, in his first year, between those items, signing bonus and the salary, I think he will get 100 mil. Hey, Hertz was probably about the same, just a little, probably 10 mil less.
I'm curious to see what the cap hit's going to be. It's going to be something ridiculous.
$100 million. You know that.
No.
It'll be different. Well, because also it's the cap hit. Well, his salary this year isn't going to be part of this contract. It's an extension, so it won't kick in.
Honestly, I think he's got either 1 or 2 more years on his rookie deal, something like that. Because he's tied with the team through 2029. So it's 2023 now. So yeah, I think he's either going into his last year or has another year left after this, something like that.
He does have another year after this.
Something like that. But yeah, regardless, that was the big news that sprung right before we went on the air. Also, just for the sake of running backs, we're talking about it. Bob's a Giants fan. Saquon Barkley signed a 1-year, $11 million deal to go to the Giants before training camp starts. He misses no time at all on any front. So, Bob, as a Giants fan, are you happy? You were right.
I'm happy. I was right. I did think it would get done, that he'd be back. But I am surprised that it was this soon. I really did think it would last longer than this. So in that regard, I wasn't correct. But great deal for the Giants. They played hardball. I think they won this. Barkley gets some incentives that could get it up to 11 million. Basically, he would need to reach, I believe, 1350 in rushing yards and make the playoffs. The other stipulation was getting, I believe, 65 catches, and the other was 10 rushing TDs were the barometers to meet some of the incentives, and they each had the same value attached to them to make up that total. But I think it's a great deal for the Giants. They didn't blink. They also didn't promise in the deal that they wouldn't franchise him next year, so we could still be headed toward that next year. But we get to see it play out, and he'll be there for the entirety of training camp now, and it just goes to show that Barkley is a good dude. I respect him a lot. People kind of aren't surprised by him doing this because of the type of guy he is and team first person he is. But if you were just looking at it from his perspective, you could argue that he caved and that he kind of gave in. But he does love football, and I respect the hell out of him for that. And I would love to see him be a Giant for life. I just would hope that the number is reasonable enough. I'm glad that it played out the way it did and that the Giants didn't cave. But there is that fan aspect or just that personal aspect where he's a good dude and you kind of respect that he went about it this way, wasn't trashing the Giants in the media or anything. So I'm happy as a Giants fan overall.
Now, do you think this shines a negative light on the Giants at all? In that you've got a player here who is your whole offense, damn near. He is one of the very best at his position. I mean, just looking at our rankings, I have him at 6. You have him in your top 5. So you've got a top 5 running back. He's a good guy on and off the field, clean, leader. I mean, seemingly everything you would want in a franchise player. Why are they lowballing him? Why are they trying to G this man? And does it give the rest of the team a bad example? I mean, you've got Xavier McKinney, who's going to be due for a deal soon. You've got Andrew Thomas, who's going to be due for a deal in a couple of years. Like, you're going to have to pay very key cogs of your team. What kind of message does this send to them that they're going to nickel and dime arguably their best player on offense by a couple of million?
It really has very little to do with him as a person. He clearly is a very good guy. He's a very marketable star, especially for New York. He's quiet, goes about his business, doesn't make waves in the media, isn't out at strip clubs or getting caught in compromising situations. So, yes, he doesn't make headlines for the wrong reasons.
Everything you want.
He makes headlines for the right reasons. However, he's a running back, and this is going on around the league. So that's where I don't think it hurts the Giants too much because it's not an isolated Giants incident. It's something that's going on around the league. We see Josh Jacobs pissed off so much that he's not in Vegas at the moment. Mm-hmm. He's having his own holdout. We see other players around the league holding out, wanting new contracts. So this isn't unique to just the Giants. This is a problem for running backs all around the league, even when I take out all the other positions and guys holding out like a Zach Martin or Nick Bosa with the 49ers. I don't think this looks bad for the Giants. This is just the Giants doing what a lot of the other teams around the league are doing. Look, the Cowboys didn't give Tony Pollard a long-term deal. The Raiders haven't given Josh Jacobs a long-term deal yet. These are 3 of the most prestigious, long-time franchises in the National Football League, all teams with 3 or more championships between the Giants, Cowboys, and the Raiders. And they're all not given their star running back, their top 10 running back for both of us, the long-term extension that they want. I don't think this looks bad on the Giants at all. If anything, it looks bad for Barkley But I do think the Giants respect him doing this
Barkley.
and they did give him more money. Granted, not a lot. I totally understand that aspect. But it was in good faith, and I really hope that they get a long-term deal done. I just really question if it's going to be what Barkley wants, which is probably 15 or 16 mil per year.
Now, my buddy Velvet Thunder, Vance, thanks for tuning in. He goes, this is all about the league dynamic that running backs aren't worth the deals they are looking for anymore. And you know what, Vance, you're not wrong, dude. I mean, I saw a graphic earlier today. I don't know if it was on something I was watching online or if it was on Instagram or something like that. Bob, maybe you sent it in the chat. I don't know. But it was a chart showing the top running back for the last 10 Super Bowl winners, and it was a bad list. It was an awful list, and it goes beyond guys like Isaiah Pacheco and stuff like that. Like none of the running backs, like the top running backs for any of the Super Bowl winners, would you consider a top 10, top 15 running back? Cam Akers for the Rams was their top back, or even. Did they have?
Well, the Patriots had Sony Michel.
Michelle, was that Michelle who's on the Rams?
Looking like they could be a dynasty in the making, and their running back for this one was Isaiah Pacheco. And in 2019, it was Damian Williams. Clearly not two household names. The list is accurate. It goes to show that you really don't need a top flight running back to be able to win in the league.
And then that's in the next, I think it was on IG, because I think the next slide was the top, I don't know if it was the top paid running backs of each season for the last 10 years and where their teams finished that season. It ain't pretty. A lot of their teams either didn't make the playoffs or got eliminated early. And now, I don't want to say that's a coincidence because I don't think that's a thing, but it's worth noting. And I think it is part of the whole equation as to why running backs are getting cheap these days.
There's so many factors like that we mentioned, but also just it makes sense to have a timeshare. We get multiple running backs in there, keep guys fresh, have guys playing at the highest level rather than be at 50% during the game. It's not a surprise that teams are just figuring, let's do a timeshare and do a running back by committee.
And that's part of the reason why these running back rankings were so tough, because we both had Aaron Jones in our top 10, but he could very well fall out of that top 10 early on in the season if Robinson or Stevenson or Etienne or Dameon Pierce go in. Hell, the Steelers just beefed up their offensive line. Why doesn't Najee Harris? The man's going to get the touches.
Well, and I have two thoughts before we close, and one of them is that you're talking about how it can just change so much year to year, basically. We could see some of our honorable mentions jump up next year. We both agree Bijan Robinson will probably be on this list next year, or even Ramondre Stevenson with the Patriots. And one that I needed to point out was Jonathan Taylor. We both had him 7. Going into last year, people were putting him as the number 1 running back.
Number 1, yep.
Number 1 in fantasy drafts. Even if we did this ranking last year and we didn't have him number 1, we were probably going to have him in the top 3.
2 or 3, yeah.
Had 1,800 yards and 18 TDs rushing.
Crazy.
Take out even the receiving, and he was absolutely dominant in 2021. Who saw the fall off coming? Now, he did have injuries. He hurt his ankle. He missed 6 games. Colts, as everyone knows, were a mess. They wind up picking 4th in the draft and taking Anthony Richardson. Colts were a disaster. Goes to show how volatile it can be year to year. Jonathan Taylor would have been top 3 last year. Now he's 7. There's going to be changes next year as well.
Yep. And then the one thing is mentioning that the timeshares that I wanted to just finish on was, I mean, outside from Aaron Jones, who, I mean, he might be the lead back, but Dylan is there, and Dylan will get the rock.
Dylan had more rushing TDs.
Dylan had more rushing TDs.
Jones had only 2.
One's
not around anymore.
So Jones is very much on the fringe. I think Dalvin Cook is on the fringe. And, I mean, for me, it'll depend on what happens with Jacobs. But it looks like for you, Tony Powell is on the fringe. So,
well, that's the thing. With him being 9, I expect him to go up. Whereas someone like Henry, you're right, time should tell. And he probably will go lower than 1 on mine or lower than 3, but I got to see it first to move him. But yeah, Pollard, yes, he's on the fringe in terms of he's not, but I expect him to get higher. Basically.
And then to close out, I did want to touch on these guys because we didn't talk about them at all. Was Eckler and Taylor. I know you talked about Taylor a little bit, 1,800 yards, etc. The main separator for me with these guys outside of the big three was the passing game. That's why Pollard, I have him at number 4 because I think he can legitimately be a guy who catches 50, 60 balls easy, especially if he's playing 16, 17 games. I don't see how you can even argue against that. The man's healthy. He should get 1,300 yards, 60 catches, 15 total touchdowns. That's top 5, baby. It's top 3. But Eckler, the receiving, he's going to be motivated. He wanted to trade. They didn't want to trade him. He wants a higher contract. How do you earn it? Show out. Go out there, put up 2,000 total yards, get 600 yards in the passing game, get 1,000 yards this year because Eckler didn't pass 1,000 last year. Get 1,000. Put up your stats. You want to get paid. That's the way to do it. And then Barkley, I mean, he should be their entire offense. I have him at 6. You have him at 5. He could finish higher, but he's another one like, There's a lot of drama there for me to be too sure. And then Taylor, I have him at 7 because he doesn't seem to contribute in the passing game as much. And it's 2023. You got to.
I feel like Pollard, as much as I feel like he can go higher on this list, 4 is just too high because the ones I put ahead of him have just proven it more. Barkley's done it for more seasons. He's been around longer by a year or so. And granted, that's no fault of Tony Pollard that he didn't get a lot of opportunity in his first 2 years.
Right.
But I still don't think the production in the last 2 years is enough to put me ahead of, especially someone like Eckler. I also didn't put him ahead of Barkley or Jacobs or Taylor, but especially Eckler. Eckler's a beast, and he is one of that. This was my last point, was just that he's criminally underrated.
He is
something that I see touted a lot in the fantasy community, and rightfully so. This man has 38 total TDs over the last 2 seasons, by far the most of any of these running backs. The next closest is actually Jonathan Taylor with 24, and as we know, about 20 of those came in 2021. He barely did a thing last year. Next after that is Derrick Henry with 23 total TDs. So this is rushing and receiving over the last 2 seasons. Eckler has 25 rushing TDs and 13 receiving TDs over the last 2 years. He just doesn't get enough credit because he's not flashy enough. He's not like Barkley. I think a lot of people would put Barkley ahead of him. But not only look at the numbers, just look at how they play. He gets more yards per carry. He's more dynamic in the passing game. Hell, he has better vision than Barkley. He's just not as explosive as Barkley. He's not going to rip off that huge 60 to 70-yard run like Barkley is, or dance around and juke guys up in the open field as much. But he's just a productive back. He's been doing it for years now, and he just really does not get enough credit that he deserves. Mm-hmm. Part of that is because of how disappointing the Chargers can be, but also they just have no fans. There's just no presence for the Los Angeles Chargers right now across the nation. And it's a shame because they have great players. We were talking about Herbert before, but Eckler is truly a top 5 running back, and the production backs it up.
I had him at number 5. You had him at number 4. I'm going to put our rankings up one more time. And with Eckler, if the man can do 1,000 yards rushing, 8 to 10 touchdowns, he's going to have anywhere from 65 to 75 receptions.
And that's what's funny too, is he's never had over 1,000 yards rushing.
He hasn't.
I'm certain that people hold against him, but with the production he gives you out of the backfield, it shouldn't matter.
But don't tell that to the old heads. But no, let me get our chart up here one more time so everyone has one more good look at it. There it is. Boom. Moving on up. Last year I did my quarterback rankings with Mike and Steve on paper, and I held it up to the screen afterwards.
Gross. This is much better. I like this. Share the screen. Give us those rankings, a little color coded with the teams. I love it. It's good stuff. But like I said before, Dalvin Cook needs a team. We need to put some colors there.
Need to put something there. The NA is ugly. So with that, Bob, do you have anything else?
That's my final thought, is just you got to look out for Austin Eckler. He's a special back. He doesn't get treated well enough And if you ever get the chance to watch a Chargers game, he's worth watching. Herbert probably a little more though.
One last comment I want to read before we go. Eckler from Velvet Thunder. Eckler should have a good year, especially if the Chargers receivers can't stay healthy. He's talking about Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They have injury problems, but they did draft Quentin Silky Johnston in the first round. So,
yeah.
Assuming I love Johnston, so assuming one of those guys go down, they should be in good hands. But with that in mind, thank you guys for tuning in for another edition of the DB Show. I want you guys to follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We will follow back. It's DB Talking Sports. D as in Dan, B as in Bob. Bob handles the IG. I run the Twitter. You follow us or follow back. Hop in the DMs. Any topics, questions, comments, concerns you want to talk about, hit us up. For Bob, I am Dan Cornser. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you guys later.